Welcome, 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 welcome. My name is Dr. Teresa Gatling. I am the co-founder and co-president of Village in the Valley. So welcome, good evening, bienvenidos to our State Board of Education District 2 Candidates Roundtable, sponsored by Village in the Valley. Brief word about Village in the Valley. Village in the Valley is a nonprofit organization with a mission of elevating and uniting the Black community while connecting the cultures in the Rio Grande Valley. Their vision is to be a beacon of unity with equal recognition and appreciation of the Black community in the Rio Grande Valley. Viva is nonpartisan. It does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. This event should not be construed or as approval or as an endorsement or sponsorship of any candidate by Village in the Valley. As part of the founding pillar, community engagement of Village in the Valley, Viva, which is also our name for short, Viva, is providing an opportunity for candidates seeking public office to take their case directly to the voters. We have a set of predetermined questions that each candidate will be asked. If time permits, we will entertain questions from the audience to ensure that a wide variety of issues will be covered. The questions will be provided to the moderator once they've been screened by me. Questions become the property of Viva and cannot be returned or discussed after tonight. All candidates running for this office were contacted. Some were unable to participate due to other obligations. Three were able to send their statements, and it will be read by our moderator in a little while. I will now turn it over to our moderator for the night, LaQuanta Bivens Hernandez. Now I'm going to give her a little introduction, but before I do, I'm going to do a coin toss, because by the coin toss, we decide who's going to begin receiving their questions first. So here we go. Oh, heads is Mr. Garcia, tails is Miss Shazo De Garza, and it's heads. So Mr. Garcia will be first. So let me tell you a little bit about Ms. Bivens Hernandez. Okay, she is a district mathematics coordinator, a member of TABC, which is Texas Alliance of Black School Education, and she holds a master's degree in education. She has over 20 years of education experience, and we are delighted to have her as our moderator for this event. And she was pretty much the one who helped really put this thing together. So Ms. Bivens Hernandez, it's yours.
Hello, thank you for that, Ms. Gatlin. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, my name is LaQuanta Bivens Hernandez, and I am going to begin by sharing the statement submitted by 3 candidates that were not able to attend. And I'm going to read the statements in the order that they were received. Candidate Victor Perez. First, I would like to thank Ms. Teresa Gatlin for inviting me to speak for today's Q&A session. Hello to today's audience. My name is Victor Perez, and I'm your candidate for the Texas State Board of Education District 2 seat. I bring over 20 years of experience in the field of education. I have served as a paraprofessional, coach, teacher, assistant principal, and administrator for school operations. With this experience under my belt, I look forward in advocating for higher teacher salaries, reducing wasteful spending, reevaluate curriculum standards, and provide every teacher in this state with a yearly grant. The yearly grant will allow for them to purchase school materials for students that are in need of a helping hand. I will also want to ensure that the option to teach and learn from home is still available to teachers and parents that do not want to risk their loved ones to exposure of COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact of the matter is that the students are falling behind. Teachers are being overworked and underpaid, and our state curriculum standards are working against our teachers and students. Now is the time to elect a steady hand in our State Board of Education. I know that I can be the steady hand that our teachers, parents, students, and our great state of Texas need in these troubling times. I hope to earn the vote of each and every one of you in this upcoming primary and in November. Early voting begins on February 14th and ends February 25th with Election Day on March the 1st, 2022. If you all have any questions regarding my campaign, please do not hesitate to contact me at 956-502-8449 or follow us and message us on Facebook. Again, thank you, RGV Viva and Ms. Gatlin, for offering me the opportunity to speak with you today. The next statement, candidate Michael Vargas. Education is the civil rights issue of our time. Not since the days of Brown versus Board of Education has our educational system been so politicized both in our state and across our nation. District 2 needs a representative with real experience and extensive knowledge to enter the arena and advocate for the nearly 1.8 million students enrolled in District 2 schools. After graduating from Brown University, I began my career in St. Louis, Missouri as a Teach for America Corps member, serving underprivileged students, where I served as a teacher, an instructional coach, and a grant administrator. I returned home to serve our very own as a school board president and in various statewide positions. I was elected as a member of the Legislative Advisory Council with the Texas Association of School Boards Board of Directors in Austin, as well as an executive committee member with the Mexican American School Boards Association. Being elected to serve in these capacities told me to leverage my current experience and continue my mission of promoting educational equality in South Texas. My platform includes the following: inclusive education, where our history textbooks are not sanitized or whitewashed; pandemic recovery, targeting students with larger achievement gaps to attend rebound academies; and mental health, where expansion of these resources will ensure that we continue to cultivate the love of teaching and mental health of every educator. The knowledge and understanding I gained, educational systems outside of Texas make me uniquely able to tackle educational issues here at home in the Lone Star State. I can bring classroom experience, innovative ideas, and a working knowledge of alternatives to the educational institutions in District 2. And candidates, LJ Francis. LJ sends his regards and wanted to show you how much he cares about transforming the RGV through education, which is true freedom. Thank you, Village in the Valley, for all you do to educate, empower, and engage. I look forward to learning from you and sharing my passion on education as we engage our future endeavors. LJ Francis had been on the campaign trail within the district over the past 8 months. Being a Christian and conservative, these values influence his actions and is the reason LJ Francis is willing to stand up for this community before we wake up to a government that dominates our lives in a country we don't recognize. Texas schools are at a crossroads. Critical race theory and the latest politically correct notion of the day do not belong in our classrooms. LJ Francis has a vision of Texas where we restore the values we need to succeed: hard work, honesty, faith in God, and faith in our country. In the primary, there should only be one name on your mind for State Board of Education, LJ Francis. For God and for Texas, thank you. I will now go over the roundtable format. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to the questions that they have been asked. Each candidate will be given an opportunity to respond to the same question. This is not a debate, but a roundtable forum. Please direct the response of the question to the audience. In fairness to our candidates, we had a coin toss, and I believe it was Mr. Thomas Garcia that will be going first. And after that, we will alternate the questions as we proceed. If time permits, we will take questions from the live stream audience. The question sorter, which is Ms. Teresa Gatlin, will sort the questions from the comments to ensure that a wide variety of issues will be covered. The questions will be provided to me. Questions become the property of Viva and cannot be returned or discussed after tonight. Again, each candidate will answer the same question and have 2 minutes to respond to the question they have been asked. Our timekeeper, Ms. Marcia Terry, can you give a wave to us? Very good. Okay. Our timekeeper will raise a 1-minute card to warn the speaker when they have 1 minute remaining, a 30-second card, and a stop card when time is up. The speaker must immediately conclude his or her remarks. Time limits are closely followed to ensure fairness to all candidates. Candidates, if you would like me to repeat a question, please just ask me. Also, do not feel that you must use up the entire 2 minutes for the question discussion. So now that you know the format, please meet 2 of the 7 candidates for State Board of Education District 2 in alphabetical order. That will be Ms. Hilda Garza De Shazo and Mr. Thomas Garcia.
So who goes first?
It will be Mr. Thomas Garcia, and then we will alternate after that.
But that's okay.
That's fine. Okay.
Thank you all, Viva,
Okay.
for organizing this roundtable. It's
Okay.
important to show up. It's important to be here and to talk about the issues. I am a candidate running for the State Board of Education because I am tired of students falling through the cracks, not feeling heard. I am an educator. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, I've been the only candidate in the classrooms teaching college access lessons and assisting the Go Center staff with making sure students complete financial aid college applications. I've seen firsthand the issues happening in our schools when it comes to mental health, when it comes to a lack of resources, when it comes to having to put our school workers at the front lines without proper reopening protocols, people getting sick, people having to get pressured to do things that are dangerous and unsafe, and yet still we call them heroes in order to educate our future children. We need to be able to fix our system. For 8 years, I have been working in the realm of college access here in the Rio Grande Valley. I wasn't supposed to go to college. On the page, I was supposed to fall through the cracks too, but teachers and counselors believed in me and they said, submit that application. It doesn't matter if you're low income. It doesn't matter if you come from a single parent household. Click submit. I got into Princeton University and I never forgot where I came from. Immediately after my first semester, I came back to PSGA and I talked to Dr. King. I said, what can I do now to give back to students? That led to summer institutes on helping students apply to college. That led to my first job after high school, teaching high school at PSGA, giving them my curriculum. Today, taking that curriculum to multiple schools. And now we're at a turning point. It's not just about filling in these gaps anymore, classroom by classroom. It's about trying to close them. The whole reason I'm in this race is because I'm sick and tired of feeling powerless, of one classroom at a time, one Zoom room at a time. We need someone who's in the fight right now to take it to the state level, to not just move away from the STAR test, but to fulfill our 21st century learning standards. I talk about digital literacy. I talk about computer science. I talk about ethnic studies. It's not enough to just move away from the STAR. We need to move towards something. We need more mental health resources from someone who sees what's happening on the ground. And we need to be able to stand up for our school worker rights, not just call them heroes, but actually treat them like heroes. On the State Board of Education, I will work hard to do that.
Thank you. And just to be clear, question number 1 was, please share with us your why. So Thomas shared what his background experience was and what his reason was for seeking election to State Board of Education, District 2. Now, Ms. De Shazo?
Yes, thank you so much for organizing this. And I think that your organization is doing great. My name is Hilda Garza De Shazo, and I bring to this election and this campaign 33 years of experience and dedication to Texas public schools. I know that it's talk about, their backgrounds and such, but I feel that I'm the candidate because experience and dedication matters. I have 33 years of experience in the Texas public schools as a teacher, an academic coach, and an administrator. I also have the dedication to the Texas public schools because I served on the Board of Trustees at McAllen ISD, and I also served on the Hidalgo County Head Start Policy Council, which is the equivalent of a school board in the Head Start program. Having been in the classroom for 17 years, and I've gone through a lot. Mr. Garcia, Thomas, I respect you, and I think you have some very good ideas, but when you say you've been through COVID, after 33 years, Mijito, I have been through a lot more than COVID. I have been through thousands and thousands of students with issues going all the way back to incidents in mental health, suicide, poverty, misunderstanding. I feel that I bring my experience and my dedication to this particular race. And I think sometimes when I hear you talk, ma'am, the readings of the other candidates, I think they're a little confused, because if you look at the roles and responsibilities of the State Board of Education, we set curriculum standards. We review and adopt instructional materials. We establish graduation requirements. We oversee the Texas Permanent Fund, School Fund. We appoint board members to military reservation and special school districts. We provide final review for rules for the State Board educator certification. And we review the commissioner's proposed award for new charter schools. Not in one of those roles does it say we deal with teacher salaries. It doesn't say that we deal with providing teachers with grants. I mean, I think that they need to look at what are the roles and the responsibilities of the State Board of Education. And if you look at them, you'll see that I have the experience, because I have worked on curriculum for over 33 years. I have worked on instructional materials for over 33 years. And I have worked on graduation requirements when way back then we had to make those requirements. I have worked with the rules of the educator certification, the PDAS, and the T-TESS, the Texas Teacher Evaluation System and Support System. So I feel that I have the experience and the dedication to be the State Board of Education board member in District 2. Is my time up, or do I have more time? Okay.
Thank you.
And before we go on, can I just ask Mr. Garcia something? Is that okay or not? It's not about Thomas, did you go to LBJ?
I did.
Was Mr. Sevna your principal?
He was.
Okay, I did you do sports at LBJ?
No, I didn't. I was just a
Okay.
student there.
Well,
Okay.
you look a lot. Okay, never mind.
Thank you.
I know Mr. Sevna, so okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I do want to remind candidates, please direct your responses of the questions to the audience. Just as a reminder, thank you. And we're moving on to the next topic, which is current educational challenges. To say that our educators are facing challenging times is a huge understatement. Concerns regarding the school culture and climate of districts and schools, employee retention, and unfinished learning are all consequences of the pandemic. So with that said, question number 2. What, in your opinion, are the most pressing educational challenges that you observe facing public education, specifically here in South Texas? And if elected, what would be your method for tackling these issues? Ms. De Shazo, you will be going first.
Well, thank you very much. I think one of the most pressing issues right now, right this minute, is learning recovery. Our kids in Texas and across the state and in the Rio Grande Valley lost a lot of learning due to the COVID. And we have to make sure that we target the hardest hit areas and get those children back to the level of learning that they were gearing towards before all of this, closing the schools and so on and so forth, which I, for one, was not in agreement with, maybe perhaps at the very beginning when things were really unsure of how, this COVID thing was going to go. And I really think that the most pressing issue is learning recovery. I think that we could do some community-based organizations, community-based partnerships so that we could work with children. Some of our children go after school programs. They go to the Boys and Girls Club. Why not form community partnerships where we could go and tutor those children 100 minutes a week? Faith-based partnerships with students who go that go to church or that can visit the churches after schools or whatever, and work with them there. I think that's a very important issue. If you go and do the research about learning recovery for the last year in our students across the country and in Texas and the Rio Grande Valley, that is a real challenge. Just today, I was at the laundromat doing some laundry because I can't use my washing machine for my comforter. And there was a little girl with her mother there, and she set up the computer, and I listened to her, and I thought, oh my God, how can they learn this way? The little girl was que le pico? And what do I do? And where do she goes, oh, I got it. I'm here. But in 42 minutes, because that's how long it took to dry my comforters, I don't think that little girl was able to learn a whole lot. She was able to interact with the teacher because she said, I had to come to the laundromat because I couldn't do it at home because my mom had to come. So I think
your time is up, Ms. De Shazo.
thank you. Learning recovery.
Thomas?
In these 2 minutes, I'll focus on mental health and teacher burnout. The reality is we live in a new world after March 2020. These two issues have always been problems, but they have been exacerbated by the pandemic. And what we're learning the hard way is that navigating out of the pandemic is proving harder than navigating within it. Students right now are suffering from depression, anxiety, thoughts of suicide, unique mental health issues that we have not seen before. We need programming at the local schools in order to address these issues. One program I often reference on the campaign trail is McAllen ISD's mental health EQ program with high school counselors, EQ counselors at each high school. They're using ESSER funds for that. We need to be able to advocate to the state legislature to permanently fund programs like that, advocating from the State Board of Education. And also on the curriculum level, developing more mental health units in the science and the health courses, destigmatizing mental health, talking about it from a cultural lens. Machistic nonsense has to stop. Young boys especially have to be able to talk about their feelings and learn how to do so productively in the classroom. And we have to be able to be there and see what's happening for students and educators alike. So teacher burnout, yes, that's under the umbrella of mental health. And it's true that this position has nothing to do with teacher pay or teacher stipends. We don't have that authority on the State Board of Education. Some of the minor authorities we do have are streamlining some of the administrative tasks that are often put in very vague guidelines to local school districts. You notice how local school districts are implementing the reading academies in such radically different ways. That shouldn't be the case. On the State Board of Education, we can be much stricter, have much more confined guidelines on how local school districts can interpret professional development opportunities. These opportunities are in good faith, but often they put too much undue burden on the educators and counselors. And the NPR article released last week, 55% of educators are thinking of leaving the profession. That would be a crisis. That would be a disaster. We need to do everything we can at the state level to prevent that.
Thank you. Moving on to the next topic of school safety, which includes cyberbullying, gun safety, and mental health. Students will be successful academically if we take care of their foundational needs. Our children should feel safe, supported, valued, and respected in their learning environments. Over the years, a new form of bullying, cyberbullying, has emerged with serious effects for the physical and mental health of many people, especially our youth. In response, legislation has passed in all 50 states, including Texas, where the mandate to address all bullying behaviors, including cyberbullying in schools, was formalized by Davis Law in 2017. I would like to introduce a special guest, Ms. Maureen Mollock of David's Legacy Foundation. Ms. Mollock will give a brief overview of her foundation and what she advocates for. Thank you for being here, Ms. Mollock.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share in this roundtable discussion. As LaQuanta said, my name is Maureen Mollock, and I am co-founder of David's Legacy Foundation. We founded this foundation after my 16-year-old son, David, died by suicide. And the months prior to his death, he was the target of relentless and devastating cyberbullying that followed him even to a new school when we moved schools. And after his death, we knew that we wanted to do something so that no other family would follow in our same footsteps. And so we worked really closely with our state legislators to pass what's known as David's Law, Senate Bill 179. And that gives schools authority to investigate cyberbullying that occurs off campus if it materially affects a student's ability to be able to learn or go to school. And what we know from the science and from research is that a child who is the victim of bullying or cyberbullying does not often go to school. And if they do go to school, they are not in any position to learn. And so it is a mental health and a school safety issue. We also know that 80% of school shooters were bullied by their classmates. And so this is a very serious topic that cyberbullying has exacerbated since the COVID-19. At David's Legacy Foundation, our mission is to end cyberbullying of children and teens through education, legislation, and legal action. And not only did we pass David's Law in 2017, we have worked the last 2 sessions and increased got some additional legislation passed that has helped support David's Legacy Foundation, some increased reporting, some suicide prevention requirements in the schools, the requirement that schools teach digital citizenship, and the criminal consequences of cyberbullying. And all of that is now going to be in the new health TEKS that the State Board of Education just passed a year ago, and it goes into effect next fall. We also, just this past session, passed SB 2050 with the help of our legislators, which is a requirement that schools now have to report the number of bullying and cyberbullying incidents on every campus, as well as have an anti-bullying and school culture committee on each campus. And that committee is responsible for surveying their students and recommending preventive measures, identifying how much time needs to be spent during the school year to talk about these issues, as well as many other responsibilities that are going to come out of this. We believe that this is a community issue, and it takes all of us working together in order to be able to make a difference. It is not just a school problem. It is not just up to the parents. It's everybody working together. What I will say is one of the additional things that we do at David's Legacy Foundation is we help parents navigate through situations. We have pro bono attorneys. We work with the different legal aid groups across the state of Texas, and we match up parents with attorneys that can help them make bullying stop. If the school has done everything that they possibly can by law to make it stop and it doesn't stop, then we can step in and help using the civil side, some civil remedies that were provided through David's Law in order to be able to make it stop. One of the things that we often hear from parents is that they don't feel like that their school district is doing enough to address the issue. Maybe their school is not following the laws. Maybe the school does not know what they're supposed to be doing. And that often creates a great deal of frustration with parents, as well as they are often also in a mental health crisis. Anybody who is a parent knows that when your child is suffering, we suffer right alongside with them. And I can completely understand that. And so I have great sympathy for parents who reach out to us because I've been in their shoes and I understand it. And so that is a problem that we're still working with our legislators on, is trying to understand, nobody's out there policing school districts, and not that that's what we want to do, but how can we help give them the tools that they need and make sure, these laws are there for a reason, right? It's a great law, a lot of time and effort in passing these laws because they want to protect our young people. And so how can we ensure that our schools are doing what they need to be doing? And so I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share what we do. And I look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you, Ms. Mollock. So that brings us to question number 3. In your opinion, should there be consequences to the mandates in David's Law for failure to comply, as well as all laws around start over again. I got toss up there. So in your opinion, should there be consequences for failure to comply to the mandates in David's Law, as well as all laws around mental health and school safety? And the second part of that question is, how can we ensure its effectiveness? And that will be Thomas beginning.
Thank you for sharing the important work your foundation does. One of the most compelling aspects of this law is the digital citizenship. It provides a model for how curricular standards matter. What we teach in the classroom matters. We can integrate curricular standards that matter today, that we know students are using social media, the internet, how to do so in a constructive and pedagogically sound way, and in a non-damaging way. We're putting guardrails in place. And on the other side, as educators, as administrators, we're making sure that we have the ability to see what's going on outside the classroom and that students are always feeling protected, seen, and heard. This law is crucial. And at the state level, I do believe there should be base standards for issues of non-compliance. The reality is every school district locally is going to have to put in their own policies in order to make sure that the data is being collected, that the policies are being reviewed, and local law enforcement is involved in serious issues of cyberbullying. The other issue is the platform. How and which way do we make sure that these issues are being investigated and that we have enough qualified people investigating issues of anonymity, issues of how does it happen if it's outside of the classroom versus in the classroom, off campus versus on campus? And how do we make sure that once an incident happens that we can continue on and learn from it as a community? We often hear of these cyberbullying and other very serious issues of bullying that result in serious tragedies in the news after the fact. We must be more proactive and make sure this doesn't happen. I do want to make sure that the elements of this bill keep on getting strengthened. It all comes down to a strong advocate on the State Board of Education. We can provide guidelines. We can say, here is how you implement these on the ground, but we need someone actually on the ground going to the local school districts and seeing what's going on to see, how do you interpret this case in this way, this social media platform, this specific incident in this way. This is where 21st century learning standards and 21st century skills come in. I am ready to do so. I have seen this with my own students. I see it too often on social media. It needs to change.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Ms. De Shazo?
You know, I feel very sad when I hear a parent talk about losing a child to suicide. And in my 33 years of experience, way before the internet and way before Facebook and all these social media, we experienced the death of several students due to suicide, whether it was a depression or a drug addiction or whatever the case. And it's always so horrific for the parents and for the teachers of these students, for their friends, and for anyone around them. So now we move forward. The point I'm trying to make is that teen suicide and those mental health issues have been around for a long time. But now we have this cyberbullying. And yes, of course, I agree that there should be mandates in every school district. Again, that's not one of our roles, but if I can have influence in those mandates being taken seriously and those mandates being applied effectively, absolutely. And remember that a lot of this has to do with parental controls. Parents need to be in charge, and they have to make sure that they need to monitor their teens' social media. They need to review or set the apps that the kids have on their phones or the location of their phones. They need to follow and be friends of their kids on social media. They need to stay up to date with those latest apps and things that they have on their phones. They need to know what the username is and the address. And they absolutely, parents have got to establish appropriate digital behavior. You don't know how many times parents would come to me and say, but Mrs. De Shazo, Senor, well, where are the parents? Why do you let your son be on the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning? Take it away from him. If your son is addicted to cocaine, are you going to provide the cocaine for him? So if your son or daughter is addicted to the internet, cut it off.
Shazo. Thank you. So in continuing with the topic of school safety, gun violence in schools and mental health. A controversial concern in Texas schools consists of gun violence and revolves around tougher gun control measures and more support for students' mental health. According to the Center for Homeland Defense and Security, Texas has reported 104 incidents at campuses where some type of gun was brandished, was fired, or hit school property during the school day. Additionally, there have been calls for each school to have at least one mental health counselor who would help students deal with such issues as gun violence, psychological struggles, and suicide risk. So question number 4, what is your view on the issue of gun violence in schools, as well as mental health assistance? Ms. De Shazo, you will begin.
Well, certainly there is a big issue with gun violence in schools. And I know that down here in the Rio Grande Valley, we have seen it too. There was an incident in Brownsville, at one of the schools in Brownsville, and several other schools. I don't want to point out just that school district. And certainly we need to focus on safety. We want our kids to feel safe in our schools. And I feel that if we have stronger safety measures, again, this is at the local level. The school board and state board of education can certainly influence, but we can't dictate that. But we can certainly promote the fact that when children feel safe, they're going to do better at school. I remember having children who didn't like to sit next to the window. No, miss, don't sit me next to the window. Okay, or they didn't want to sit next to the door. Those were issues that concerned them and they were afraid. Had nothing to do with guns, but it was a fear. And so I believe that the gun issue is a huge issue, but we need to set more security guidelines, pinpoint the students that we know or we feel have an issue. I had a student at the middle school who in 6th grade, we warned his mother about his issues. Take him to a doctor, take him to talk to the priest. No, it'll pass. Well, that child ended up committing murder at one of the high schools. And we knew there we had to do something, and we encouraged. Again, parental involvement is so important. Parental supervision is so important. Plus the schools being part of that, recognizing the children, because as educators, and Thomas, I'm sure you know this, as educators, we can pinpoint the kids that we know are going to have some issues and focus on those hard hit areas, those kids that we know are likely to, be being bullied or whatever. We have to have very strict safety standards every week, every day, every month of the school year. And I think that's how we could handle that better.
Thank you, Ms. De Shazo. Thank you. Thomas?
This is a very important question. I'll answer it in 2 parts. One is focusing on the guidance. TEA often does a terrible job on both very vague guidance standards and also how you get those standards to the school districts. You can go to the TEA website, see a couple of PDFs on school safety, some suggestions on how to enter memos of understanding with local peace officers and how to put certain employees and contractors in your schools to keep it safe. But the reality is those are very reactive situations, and we're not being proactive enough in trying to make sure we can reach out to parents and families, making sure that everything is going all right in the household. I used to intern at PSJ's parent engagement program. Part of that is, yes, education, but also safety. What is going on in the households? Because what happens there happens directly in the classroom. We need to make sure that we understand always what's going on in our neighborhoods and classrooms. That takes extensive, active local partnerships. The second part is curriculum. When we talk about mental health and when we talk about prevention of violence, this needs to be woven in early in middle school in our mental health units. We have to talk about specific types of mental health. What leads one to violence? What leads one to suicide? What leads one to harm? Specifically on the topic of gun violence. We need to be able to talk and destigmatize these issues at the curricular level in the science and health courses. We need to be able to do more at the state level to then go down to the local level and say, in this area, there might be a high level of X amount of violence, Y amount of prevalence of this issue, depression, anxiety, you name it. And here are the curricular and instructional materials and the curricular standards you can use to address this in your local school, because one size doesn't fit all. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of on the ground work, but it's necessary. That is one of the unique advocacy positions I want to champion on the State Board of Education, seeing what's happening in the rural districts versus the urban districts. How can we make sure that the curriculum instructional materials we create actually resonate? So it's not just a one size fits all.
Thank you. Moving on to the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. In the summer of 2020, racial inequality and injustice captured the world's attention, which led to many, but not all, school and district leaders to look at its effects on students. Educational leaders in many states across the country are struggling with this very reality as legislators in numerous states take steps to restrict efforts to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. So question 5, as we move to more inclusive teaching, how does the existing curriculum considerations support the necessary addition of varied perspectives? Thomas, you will begin.
Social studies curriculum is often where we begin, but it's not where we should end. There's a lot of debate on how do we talk about hot button issues like race in the classroom. The reality is laws like Texas SB 3 that remove the requirements to teach certain texts, such as Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, have a chilling effect in the classroom. Teachers are trying to teach the civil rights movement, and that's the basic. You should be able to teach that. Everybody should learn that. Teachers are now afraid of complaints that they're teaching critical race theory when in reality, they're trying to teach the basic civil rights movement curriculum. Beyond that, I support ethnic studies. I'm a huge proponent of local stories being told. The stories here in the Rio Grande Valley, like the Far Riot, like the Ed Couch Elsa walkouts, students should be learning about that. When I was a high school teacher, my students didn't even know who Cesar Chavez was. I mean, this is ridiculous. We're sending them out to the real world. They don't know their own cultural history. We need to be able to integrate these standards in our social studies courses, regardless of SB 3. We need curricular standards that encourage no more sage on the stage, but more so critical facilitating so we can have differing viewpoints in the classroom. So there's less chance a teacher will get a complaint that the teacher was inserting race or a certain topic into the classroom. It was more so a debate with differing viewpoints where the students can get into a Socratic seminar or a discussion on. I can provide guidance on that on the top down because I've been doing that for 8 years with College Access. We also need to make sure that ethnic studies doesn't get defanged. I do support making ethnic studies courses social studies credits so more students can enroll in them. I also support expanding those to more middle schools. I also support the eventual creation of Asian American studies because the more options you have, the more history that you can access. It's not about requiring it, but it's about the access. Then you have a more educated workforce, you have a more educated society. Students who want to learn about their histories shouldn't have to be like me to go to college on the East Coast and learn about your cultural history. You should be able to do so in the classroom, especially at the high school level. I would advocate at the middle school level in social studies and in the ethnic studies courses.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Ms. De Shazo?
You know, when I first started teaching at PSJA High School, we were one of the very first school districts that had in the English department curriculum a unit on Mexican American studies and Mexican American authors. And within, it wasn't a requirement, it wasn't an elective, it was within the curriculum. So I feel that we were doing it. We were allowing our students to know who their Hispanic writers locally and nationally and statewide. I feel that ethnic studies are really important because we are such a diverse state and becoming more so. And you know, you can take, when I was a high school English teacher, we learned, the thing I wanted my students to understand is that you learn about life through literature. Through literature, we learn about why people did things or do things, what motivates those individuals to think and say and act the way they do, and what do we learn from this that will benefit us. It's also very important as an English history teacher to look at the background of the writer. Before I even started any story, novel, excerpt of an essay, I insisted that my students read about the author. Where did this person come from? How did this person grow up? How is he or she similar to you? Because you see, when kids, individuals see themselves in literature, in history, they will want to connect more. So I think ethnic studies is very important, and it should be, because children will see themselves. You know, Dolores, the protagonist in a story, or Juan D, which is Juan Diego, but was called Juan D. It's important that we make sure our students get all of those.
Thank you, Mr. Shazo. Time is up.
Mhm.
We're going to move on. We touched on a little bit about it, but SB 3 updates House Bill 3979. SB 3 will reshape how social studies teachers can discuss race and current events in their classroom, as well as include directives to the State Board of Education to modify certain portions of the social studies teach for civil education. Additionally, what began as a debate over social studies curriculum and critical race studies, which is an academic theory about how systemic racism enters and affects society, has evolved into an effort to ban books, some of which consist of classic American literature. So question number 6, what is your view on SB 3 as well as the banning of certain books? Mr. Shazo, you may begin.
You know, I think SB 3 attempted to move the requirement to do it, but it didn't say you couldn't do it. You just couldn't require it. If I want my students to read the Martin Luther King speech, I can't require it, but I can do it. I can have that done in my classroom. You could take the book To Kill a Mockingbird and make it a racist book, which is ridiculous. My students, year after year after year, loved the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, and they learned about life through literature. I think it's banning a book. Somebody said the other day, oh, some senator or congressman or something gave Governor Abbott a list of 830 books. Well, I want to see the list. I want to see what list they're talking about. It's one thing to say they gave him a list of 830 books to remove from the library. Well, I want to see that list because I've probably read 800 of those books or most of them. I just think that if you look at it, it says it eliminates the requirement to do it, but it doesn't eliminate the fact that you can bring that literature. We used to listen to the Martin Luther King speech all the time. I used to play it. I encouraged my teachers to play a song that was very popular in the 1960s because it was all about the Vietnam War. And we could associate, the kids would understand. Look at the poetry in the song. Look at the figurative language in that song and understand, why is this man so angry? Why is he or she, why is this person so upset? To me, it removes a requirement, but it doesn't remove the teacher's academic freedom to choose to what he or she can bring into the classroom and have the children read it, understand it, and look at it honestly, truthfully, without any indoctrination. Just look at it, debate it. I was a debate coach, and I would tell my students, you're not going to win a debate if you say, oh, I 100% believe in this. Because you got to argue both sides and win both sides.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Garcia?
I'm opposed to Texas SB 3 because of its chilling effect on freedom of speech and intellectual freedom. It's true that it simply removes the requirements to teach texts. And when you look at these texts, you see that there's a pattern. Most of them are by minorities and women and underrepresented histories. The impact of that is teachers now have a choice. I could still teach them, yes, technically, but now there's a risk. When you teach something like Rosa Parks, MLK Jr., teachers on the ground have been telling me, well, I'm afraid of how to do it now. I have to do it in a very particular way. I'm concerned about parental complaints because of the current national debate on critical race theory. The reality is teaching the civil rights movement and what MLK Jr. did and what that speech means should not be critical race theory or considered that. On the State Board of Education, the way we need to address SB 3 in its current form is to provide instructional materials, guidelines to teachers. How can you still teach some of these texts? If you do choose to teach them, how can you do so in a way that is, first of all, more pedagogically sound? I have always been a proponent of Socratic seminars, of debates, of putting student-centered pedagogy first rather than sage on the stage. I think this bill could, ironically, give some good outcomes, making sure that teachers are more so critical facilitators rather than just lecturing on a topic on their own opinions. The second point is I am against book bans. I have looked at this book ban list, and it's a political list. Again, coincidentally, most of these writers are minorities, women, LGBTQ. It's absurd. Local control matters. And so if parents, PTA groups don't want certain books in the libraries for legitimate reasons, because they read the books, they saw them, they said, this is not good for elementary students. That should be a discussion on the local level, but the state should not be breathing down school districts' backs and saying, we're going to do an investigation of your library and banning books we don't like on topics we don't like. There's enough issues on school districts' hands rather than what's in their libraries. Libraries and classrooms alike should be places of critical facilitation. Views you agree with, views you don't agree with. The teacher, the librarian should be the facilitator, and you should have access to all those things.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Continuing on our topic of financial transparency. Many residents believe that despite the overall wealth of the state, there are inadequacies toward the public education system. Among the problems commonly cited are flaws in the school financing system, relatively low teacher salary, poor test performance by students, debate regarding assessing student and school performance, and dropouts from traditional schools in favor of charter schools and/or other alternatives. Please speak on both transparency within the school's financial system and teacher salary. Mr. Garcia, you will go first.
On the issue of transparency, again, the TEA website is a disaster. We shouldn't be putting the onus on parents to have to first find these arcane PDFs after several clicks on a website. We do solicit input from parents on things like the social studies TEKS. There's a lot of outreach from the TEA on issues like that. But when it comes to actually sending parents actual, realistic, useful information on financial transparency, we often don't get that. I know this firsthand. In K through 6th grade, my mother placed me in a private religious school. She put me there because she thought it was a good school, because I was going to learn religious morals. And I did. But the reality is that school was never forthcoming on what it means to be a good school, what their financial background was, the fact that the teachers weren't credentialed. That is a radical example. Unfortunately, a version of that happens in many of our schools today. When you look at a 2-page PDF on the TEA website and you see a 99 out of 100 score, what the heck does that mean? We need to be able to decipher that, break it down, make actual relevant, accessible information, and get that to the parents and get that to the local school districts so they can facilitate it to the parents, so they can make the right choices about what kind of schools they're going to get their students into. The second part about teacher pay, of course, I support higher teacher pay. The state is way behind the national average, but I'm glad Mrs. De Shazo opened with this earlier. Some of my Democratic opponents have been running on this issue. The State Board of Education has nothing to do with increasing teacher pay. Of course, it's a popular issue. We all agree on it, but we do not have that authority at the State Board of Education. We could be advocates for this issue at the state legislature, and we need to fight loudly for that. But of course, we need to be able to focus on what we can control, which is largely administrative and guideline writing. When it comes to school transparency, we can do that at the State Board of Education. We can fight for better standards, how we get those standards to our local school districts and our parents. And we can get data input from the ground. Something I've been talking about is survey data, talking to parents on the ground, school districts. How do we make sure we collect all this data, take it to the state level, and then facilitate what information needs to be provided on the ground so they can make the right choices for their children?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Your time is up. Ms. De Shazo?
You know, schools are funded by taxpayer dollars. And I'm old enough and have worked hard enough to know that whenever a public entity takes money from the taxpayers, they are responsible to let us know exactly where that money goes. I don't care if it's a nickel, I don't care if it's a dollar, I don't care if it's $1 million. The public, the parents have a right to know where our tax dollars are being spent. And yes, it should be public information and easily accessible. A parent should not have to say, I need a PIR, public information report, or I want a parent should just be able to ask the question. And some parents cannot go online and do it. They're not going to know how to click here and click there and click there. I'm a one-click girl. If I can't get it on the first click, you know what? I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call the mayor, or I'm going to call the superintendent and say, make me a hard copy. I'm on my way to go pick it up. And I think that parents and school districts should hold sessions, public sessions, although very few parents will go, but you can make them go by having their kids dance and sing and have cookies and cake, because parents are going to go see their kids, and they will then be shown, this is how your money is spent. I think every school district that takes money, and they all do, from the feds or from the taxpayers, should have a very readily available list of how your tax dollars are being spent, because those are our tax dollars. We pay for public education, and we need to know exactly where every penny goes. And it should be readily available to any taxpayer, whether you're a parent or not. I'm not a parent, but I pay school taxes. I'm not going to say I shouldn't have to pay taxes because I don't have kids. Somebody paid for my school when I was growing up, and whether they had children or not, somebody paid for me, and I have to pay it back.
Thank you, Ms. De Shazo. Continuing on to the topic of testing. In 2018, TA instituted a new A through F accountability system for grading the performance of public schools, which heavily relies on standardized testing. Question number 8. What are your feelings regarding high-stakes testing and/or standardized testing with consideration of the most recently added STAR redesign? Ms. De Shazo, you may go first.
I have been through more testing in the Texas state schools than I think anybody in this race. And at the beginning, it was simply a matter of measuring what our children had learned. It was a measure, what they knew. Then it went on to how much they can know. And then it was on critical thinking skills. And then it was TOPS and TABS and none. I think that testing serves a purpose. There is a purpose, but what you do with the results, it's what's important. Critical thinking skills are lifelong skills. They're not something you teach to the test, because I want my students and all students in the state of Texas to be able to read. And when they read well. They should be able to learn those critical thinking skills as lifelong skills. I don't think that test results should be used to commend or not commend a school district. The test should be able to measure growth. If this child was here in this grade level, he needs to get to here by the second grade level. And teaching to the test or a test is not going to do it, but show the growth and use those results to say and prove that we are teaching what we're supposed to and how we're supposed to, so that our students can succeed. A reading teacher, kids, a lot of people don't like to read. I'm a reader, you may not be a reader, but you know what? When you read, I want you to know how to read well. That's the important thing. That's what we need to teach our kids in Texas. We're not making book lovers out of everyone. We're not making reader lovers out of everyone. But you take a can of soup and somebody had to write that, and somebody has to read it. So reading, writing is important. And I think that testing has a purpose, but it's what we do with the results that's very important. And don't make it such a stressful thing. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. De Shazo. Time is up. Mr. Garcia?
The STAR test is a disaster. The redesign is not much better. And it should be used only for diagnostic purposes, not for accountability purposes, and especially not this year. We've been through a couple of unordinary years, and it's ridiculous that teachers are still expected to teach to the test. The reality is we often talk about moving away from the STAR test, and I do believe we should. If it stays in place, it should be used for diagnostic purposes, issues of tracking growth. But then the question is, what do we move toward? Then we have the curricular ability to, yes, teach the fundamentals. We need to make sure that we can catch our students up, that they know how to read, know how to do math, but also we have an opportunity to move forward into the 21st century and really innovate our curricular standards. I talk about digital literacy in all of our core courses, whether it's deciphering misleading statistics in math or learning about fake information on the internet in a practical setting. These things simply aren't tested, and we need to be able to learn these things. Teachers want to do project-based learning, service learning, like I was able to do in my high school course, but teaching to the test gets in the way of critical thinking skills and actually measuring the impact you're making in your community. I talk often about equitable computer science. So yes, computer science is offered at the high schools, but in some high schools, you learn how to print hello world. And at others, the wealthier high schools, they're graduating students who are going off to Microsoft and Google knowing how to code. We need to bridge that gap. And when we can focus more on bridging that gap rather than trying to fix the star through these redesigns, then we can actually move our state forward. Yes, move away from the star, move towards something. I also support dual language programs. We can have different kinds of tracks for emergent English, emergent Spanish, emergent second language. I also support ethnic studies, of course. Give the students more options to take courses that actually matter for the 21st century: civic literacy, digital literacy, service literacy, and actually living up to HB5 endorsements. If someone is in the arts and humanities, they shouldn't have to be teaching, learning to the test and being taught to the test and drill and kill. They should actually be doing something that's worth it, research-based.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Audience, thank you for staying with us. We have one more question and then we will allow closing statements. So the next question will be on the topic of public school. Question number 9, what is your view on charter schools and/or homeschooling as being preferable alternatives to traditional public schools, especially for students at high risk for dropping out? I believe Mr. Garcia, you'll go first.
Parents have every right to place their children in the schools they choose. The issue is access. I am a supporter of strong public schools. And if we are diverting taxpayer funds to a school, no matter what kind of school it is, there needs to be standards to make sure that that taxpayer fund is being used correctly. And often at charter schools, we have private interests at play, and the system needs to be reformed. I do support elected boards at charter schools. That's good for everybody when you can choose your leaders and you can keep them accountable for how they're using taxpayer funds. When parents choose where to put their students, they need to be given the right information about making the right choices where to place them. We talked about transparency and accessibility earlier. We need to hold charter schools to the same standard. It's not enough to just paste your meeting notes outside the front desk so parents can come to you. We need to also make sure that charter schools are held to the same accountability when it comes to enrolling more diverse populations, including low-income students, including special needs students. Part of the reason why I support increasing the education compensatory fund is that would encourage school districts that already enroll low-income and special needs students and other student populations to get more per pupil funding. The reality is when students go from a public school to a charter school, there's stranded costs at the public school. That impacts everybody. It doesn't mean that the light bill goes down or the facilities cost goes down or they can just get rid of teachers. That brunt cost is placed disproportionately on low-income students and students who are already fallen through the cracks. So we need to make sure that when parents have the choice to place their students elsewhere, whether it's a charter school, homeschool option, that isn't negatively impacting our public schools, because we got to make sure everybody is in the system that works best for them. If the parents choose to place them elsewhere, that is their choice. We need to make sure that they're making the right choice with the right information, the right accessible information. At the same time, not making sure that our public schools are not losing funds and that the students at the public schools aren't bearing the brunt of those decisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. De Shazo.
You know, charter schools have a formula, and they have a formula that has worked for them. I don't know exactly what the formula is, but something is working because well, maybe not more and more, but there's a lot of parents who are choosing their children to go to IDEA or Vanguard or whatever these charter schools are. Back when I was an assistant principal at PSJ Memorial Middle School, I became part of a group with TEA called TSII, which was Texas School Improvement Initiative. I was one of 30 administrators who traveled across the state to visit schools that had deficiencies in some areas, 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, whatever it was. We visited with the schools for a whole week. We interviewed everyone from the superintendent to the teachers, to the custodians, to the bus drivers, to the kids, community leaders, parents, everyone. And after a week, we got together and we made recommendations as to how to improve the school's learning and environment to where these deficiencies could be addressed. Some of the schools that we visited were charter schools. And I can tell you right now, some of them were awful. but others were at the beginning stage of the formula that was working for them. Again, I think that, yes, the charter schools, they need to be held at the same standards. They need to have the equity with the public schools. You know, I want to be able to park a bus in Weslaco at 6 o'clock in the morning and bring the kids over to my school district. Why can't I do that? The charter schools can do that, but I can't. I think that when teachers at charter schools are at-will employees, that's a little tough for me, being a teacher and a teacher advocate for many years, because at-will means that you can be fired at will. So I think they have some issues that need to be addressed. I also think that charter schools, as far as elected boards, I don't agree with that. I think that makes it real political, and I just think they have a formula that needs to be reviewed.
Thank you, Mr. Shazo. Your time is up. Okay, so thank you all. As we close out, I want to give each candidate about 30 seconds just to close. And if there's anything else you'd like to share, but a quick 30 seconds, please.
Who starts?
It will be Mr. Shazo.
Okay. Again, if you look at my card says, because experience and dedication matters. And that's why I chose that to be my battle cry in this election. I am the teacher. I am the candidate with the experience. 5 of the 5, I'm on the Republican primary. 5 of the people, the candidates in the Democratic primary, 3 of them are graduates of the school district where I taught. Of those 3, one of them, I was his boss when he was a teacher, a coach at the middle school. So I think that I should be the candidate to vote for, because I bring that experience, dedication to the table.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia.
First, I want to thank Mrs. De Shazo for showing up. This was a great discussion. I look forward to having more of these through November. And I want to talk more about the issues. That's what this campaign is about. And despite disagreements, which we will have many, I appreciate you showing up and having this important discussion. My last point is that, of course, I do not have quantity of years, but I do believe I have quality of years, including teaching, curriculum development, on-the-ground experience during the COVID-19 pandemic. We need a new leader who can solve the new problems we face in this new world. I am the only candidate who can do that.
Thank you.
Call me Thomas.
Thank you. So I do want to thank the candidates for your participation, and I wish you well in your campaigns. And let's go ahead and pass it over to Ms. Marcia Terry, unless Ms. Gatlin, if you have anything else to share as well.
Thank you so much, everybody.
I love your hair.
Oh, thank you. Let me just go on gallery view. There we go. So thank you so much, everybody, for being a part of our Zoom audience and for being on our Facebook live stream. We really appreciate everybody who showed up today. It really means a lot. It did take a lot to put this together. And so we just want to say thank you once again for everybody for being here. That being said, please remember early voting is right around the corner. As Dr. Gatling stated at the beginning, Viva is a nonpartisan, we're non-political. We just literally want to ensure that the candidates are informed, that voters are informed voters when you go to the polls. So thank you once again. And please, if you're interested in knowing more about Village in the Valley, please go to villageinthevalley.org, where you can find more about our organization, and you can become a member and support our endeavors, this being one of them and several other things that we do. So thank you all. Have an amazing evening, and we will see you next time. Be well.